According to Brian Windhorst, the Los Angeles Lakers may have turned down LeBron James wanting to sign a multi-year contract to stay with the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll talk about what that means. And also, we're going to look at some other stars around the league that could be traded between now and next offseason. We're going to talk about all that and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go to get into this content for today, y'all. So on the Hoops Collective, Brian Windhorst said this. I know some people have been talking about the Lakers looking at 2027, and as like a big free agent year, well, their actions are indicating that they're also eyeing 2026. But everybody's got their story. The LeBron James side is very clear that they didn't ask for extra years. I'm skeptical of that. Whether they asked for it or whether they wanted it are two different things. So there's a whole term about offer and ask and all that stuff. But long story short, the Lakers don't have LeBron under contract for next year. And the contracts that they have signed are protecting next year's money already. So there's been a lot to be made over this over the last couple of days and things like that about what's going on with LeBron James, if he is somebody that the Lakers are looking to hold on to or not, or whatever, when it comes down to that. And this is the first time that LeBron is really going into a situation. He's going to be a complete free agent at the end of it, and things like that. Like, he doesn't have a contract extension. And I know that that's naturally going to have its own talk around it. It's naturally going to have it's people who want to have think pieces and everything on it. All that's going to happen when that's going on. There's nothing that you can do to stop that from happening. And the Lakers, if they are in this place now where they are looking to maintain assets and space so they can continue to build around Luka Doncic, that shouldn't be something that anybody's too surprised at, to be 100% honest with you. This is something that most people should have expected when it came down to it, of how this could happen with LeBron James and how this could happen with the Los Angeles Lakers. Like, once you get Luka Doncic in there, you are absolutely looking to build around Luka. You are looking to craft your roster around the skill set of Luka Doncic and get what he needs so that he can be successful and that they can try to be a championship team. And so because of that, you're now going to see like the Lakers are moving towards that. They're moving actively towards that goal. They're trying to live in that goal. There is nothing wrong with that. And for anybody who thinks that there is something wrong with it, I got to wake you up. This is business. This is business. That is what this is. It's completely business when it comes down to it. And the Lakers, with their asset management, especially when you're looking at the first and second tax apron and all how teams are trying to avoid that, you have to be very intentional about how you build your team, especially if you feel like you have a window that could be open so that you can truly compete for a title. LeBron's great, and LeBron's still amazing. What he's able to do at his age, you cannot take away from that at all. But the Lakers looking at, if this is true and what Windhorst is saying, they're prioritizing having cap flexibility going forward, I can't find a way to blame them for that. I personally can't. It is what it is. LeBron's going to have his fair share. If he does not re-up with the Lakers, he can go to almost any team he wants to go to. If he says, hey, I want to come to this team, a team's going to try to find a way to make that happen. And I think that's just is what it is when it comes down to. This is just the business aspect. Yeah, it's a little weird to see it be LeBron that's put in this situation. So that fact is not lost on me at all. But at the end of the day, like, the Lakers have to do what they feel is best for their franchise, and what they have to do is best for the new direction that they chose once they were able to get Luka Doncic. And that's what we're going to see. I personally don't think they've necessarily had the best moves to support that either. I want to be clear there. I don't think that the moves that they made, like getting Ayton for what they got him for, is great. That's fine and dandy, but I don't necessarily look at what they've done, especially losing Dorian Finney-Smith without really much of an effort. I don't look at that and say the Lakers have made such great moves that are clearly now you have this amazing team around Luka. I'm not saying that either, but if they're waiting to 26 and 27 where they can make some bigger splashes to make that happen, I can't be mad at that. But this naturally got me thinking, what are some of the other players and names around the NBA that could be moved? Now, I have some that I have personally. I have some that just make sense. And, I think, of course, we'd be remiss on a list like this to not talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo. While the Milwaukee Bucks made moves, and you can't take away from the moves that they made, it's great to see what they've done. They got creative in a place where people didn't think that they really had much flexibility to get creative to try to convince Giannis to stay. And who like Giannis is loyal to that franchise. He's loyal to that city, right? He said it. Like, this is the city that his kids were born and raised in. So he does have a loyalty to that. But we also know that Giannis is somebody who said if he feels like the best opportunity to compete is not going to be in Milwaukee, that is what it is. So while he has not officially requested a trade yet, it can come at any point. And I think if this thing does crash and burn for the Milwaukee Bucks, what there is a chance of it doing, I think that you could very well see around this time next year, instead of it being Kevin Durant, it's Giannis, if it even makes it to that much. I've said it before. He's going to go through training camp. He's going to see what the team looks like in training camp. And then I think, again, you're going to reevaluate leading into the trade deadline. And then if he feels comfortable, like, okay, we'll see it through for the rest of the season, he could very well ask for a trade either at the trade deadline or next offseason. So Giannis Antetokounmpo is definitely a player that I think could be on the move sooner rather than later, depending on what happens with that team. The next player I want to bring up is Trae Young. Now, I will give the Hawks credit. What they've done around Trae is that they gave themselves a run. But I personally like to look at this and say that, and I love what the Hawks did. I want to be clear. I like the Hawks roster a lot in what they brought here. Jalen Johnson is one of my favorite players to watch in the NBA. Dyson Daniels, really what he did with his career last year. You got Risha Sher there, who I think started coming on a little bit better towards the end of the year. You added Kristaps Porzingis, who you needed on that team as far as an anchor down there defensively and a player that can still put up points. They did that, and that's great to see. But I do think that it's something to be said that the Hawks may be looking at this and saying, with a weaker East, Pacers aren't going to be much of anything this season. Maybe a tough, scrappy team, but they're not going to be what they were before. With Halliburton out and Miles Turner gone, they're not going to be what they were before. With the Boston Celtics being weaker, with missing Jason Tatum, still being a tough team, this is your opportunity to show us. Yeah, the Orlando Magic have made improvements. The Philadelphia 76ers could be a team that definitely is better than what they were last year with just health. But if this thing can't, for some reason, if the Atlanta Hawks find themselves in the play-in yet again and then able to go to the actual playoffs, do not be surprised if they do look in the offseason to make a pivot off Trae Young. And I think that that's the right decision to do. You have a nice growing young roster here. You got Asa Newell in here. You already got Jalen Johnson. We just named off all the young players that are on this roster. You have an opportunity now to pivot if you decide to do so. You added Nickeil Alexander-Walker, another good signing for you that I love what they've done there. So you've made some things to give yourself an opportunity this season to go, and I commend them for that. But I would be remiss not to say that there isn't a world in which, if this fails, and again, if this fails, that Trae Young may not turn around and be on the trade market. That's just my personal opinion. You guys can let me know how you feel down below. One player that I think is not really an if, it's more of a win, and that's Lauri Markkanen. The Utah Jazz, after Lauri was initially traded there and had the best season of his career, a comeback season by a lot of people, and the way that they looked at Lauri leading into that after he left the Bulls and the one season with the Cavs. But since that season, he's basically been in trade rumors and on the trade market. And I don't know why they haven't pulled a deal yet. There's always talks around every trade deadline about what they could have got offered or a team being interested in Lauri. And I think now, especially with them having a pick that's top 8 protected, that if this is a season where they definitely can look to move off Lauri, stack more assets, which that's what the Utah Jazz are in the business of doing right now, stacking assets. And if you can stack that asset in and get off Lauri Markkanen and get some more assets in here, I don't see Danny Ainge passing up on that opportunity. I think Lauri's been really good. He's been a player that's put up really good numbers on a team that's not winning, right? And the teams typically want to look at the guy and say, all right, but if we get him in our winning program, if we get him in our winning system, how much further could he take his game? Lauri's not 31 years old. Lauri's, still a fairly young player, not extremely young, right, anymore like he was, when the Bulls drafted him. But this is still a player that still does have a lot of time left on what he can end up being in the NBA. And so because of that now, and having still that upside of what he can still turn into, you definitely got to look at it and say that there are going to be some teams that are interested in seeing what Lauri can be. He's 28 years old. So he's still in the prime of his career. And so if you're able to make that trade for Lauri, you need a little shot in your arm at the trade deadline. Lauri Markkanen makes a lot of sense for a lot of teams. And like I said, he's the one guy on this list that I'm saying it's not a question of if. To me, it's a question of when. It's going to happen. Is it going to happen this season? It's going to happen at the trade deadline. It's going to happen next offseason. But Lauri Markkanen's time in Utah is coming to an end. I'd be willing to bet on it. It's happening sooner rather than later. And then my conspiracy theory pick on this list, Nikola Jokic. Now, the reason why I have Jokic on here, and the Denver Nuggets, much like the Atlanta Hawks, they made moves. You added the depth that you've needed around Jokic for a while that he hasn't had there. You've maintained most of the same team other than that. And I think that, the Denver Nuggets are still a really, really good team. But I do think at some point, they've already moved Michael Porter Jr. At some point, with now Mike Malone gone, and we'll see what happens with Jamal Murray eventually, that it could get to a place where the Nuggets are just going to have to admit we've now lost our window's closed. And with your window being closed and Jokic still being able to be what he's going to be like, I want to be clear here. He's not going to do that. They're not going to move him unless he requests and asks for a trade, which I think things would have to get pretty bad in Denver for that to happen. But I do think that there is a chance, depending on how this crashes and burning. They won 50 games last season. They're always going to win that around that with Jokic on your team. That's how good Jokic is. You brought in Cam Johnson to this team. I love that move for this team. You're getting Daron Holmes back, and hopefully he's going to be able to be what you thought he was going to come off the bench and be able to be for you when you drafted him. And there's still a lot of promise on this Denver Nuggets team. But if they ever realize the window for us to really be competitive and win a title is probably closed, you can stack yourself with assets that can set you up for the future as you are going to have to go on a rebuild, and you can set yourself up. And I think that there is an inevitability about that happening. It's just, did they do enough this offseason to push that back a little bit? If they have, cool, great. But I won't act like there's not a chance of that, especially now that Jokic just turned 30 in this past February. And after you get over 30, that's when things start coming together. Like we're seeing players playing to 36, 37. So not to say that Jokic doesn't have a long career left ahead of him. He still has years left if he wants to play. But I do think that the Nuggets may eventually have to be forced to ask themselves, can you do it in the time that you have? And if you can't, that's where things may change. But let me know what you guys think on that list down below on players that could eventually get off their teams here in the next year or so, depending on what happens. But with that said, we're just going to end it on this. Bradley Beal, the buyout is still expected to happen here sooner rather than later. And it looks like we're starting to have the teams that are interested in him once he does clear waivers and he's bought out. And it's the two LA teams, which makes sense. The Lakers and the Clippers are there. But also the Golden State Warriors, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Miami Heat are all listed as teams that could be interested in Bradley Beal once he clears waivers and he's bought out. And here's the thing. I know people are going to talk about Bradley Beal as if he's some completely washed up player. And while he's not what he was before, I want to be clear, he's not what he was even the last couple of years in Washington. Bradley Beal in the right role is still a player that can help a lot of teams. I think he's still a player that can help teams bring what they need as far as scoring. I do think he may have to accept a bench role to extend his career. And if he's willing to do that, I think he can find the right spot. But one of the things about buyouts and all that is that it allows you to pick a team based off where you want to be and not necessarily based off the money. And so hearing that these teams are the teams that are expected to be interested in him once the buyout is reached, I'm not surprised at that. The Lakers are always going to take their shot. The Clippers, once they traded Norman Powell, those rumors started. Kind of a lot of people have now listed them as the favorite to potentially get Bradley Beal. The Golden State Warriors, why not add another old player to that team to keep adding to your wild hog season, as I called it, for the Golden State Warriors? So it all makes sense. The Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, they are going to keep looking for cheap talent to add there. And if you can add after losing Dame, using the wave and stretch on Dame to sign Miles Turner, if you're able to add Bradley Beal to that afterwards for what would be a relatively cheap contract, it makes a lot of sense there, right? So I don't know how successful it's going to be, but it makes sense for them to take that chance if that's what they want to do. So we shall see. The market's starting to build for Bradley Beal. People are expected and waiting for him to be bought out, and I guess we'll see where he's going to go after that. Let me know down below, though, which team do you think makes the most sense for Bradley Beal? It could be one of the teams that we listed, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Heat, the Warriors, or the Bucks, or it could be a different team that you think could make some sense. I personally think if the Orlando Magic wanted to try to go after Bradley Beal to have him add some more extra scoring off the bench, that he could make some sense there personally. But let me know a different team if you do have a different team listed on there. But otherwise, you guys can follow me at CEO Hayes. You can follow the show at NBA Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBACentralShow@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. See you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.